When you're ready.
How does resilience in times of hardship differ in underdeveloped and developed countries? The story Long Walk to Freedom, written by Nelson Mandela, shares what he learned during his 27 years spent in prison. This story is a good example of what resilience is and why it's important. During Nelson's time in prison, he experienced being dependent on bills, constantly being put to work, and losing determination, although he continued to be resilient, which is defined as the psychological capacity to adapt to stressful circumstances and bounce back from adverse events. Resilience does not solve problems, but instead helps one keep going. From the opposing perspective, the dark side of resilience states that too much resilience can be a bad thing. If carried too far, adaptive tendencies become destructive, and energy can be misdirected on unattainable goals and make people overly tolerant to adversity. It is important to maintain a balance and not rely on it too heavily. Individuals and small groups can discover the advantages and limitations of resilience as seen in the Long Walk to Freedom jail narrative. However, it may also be seen on a worldwide scale. There's a wide range of development levels. Due to a country's economic, environmental, and overall situation, their level differs. Whether industrialized or advancing, all countries face adversity and must be resilient. Geographers frequently try to categorize places using a scale of development, dividing nations into developed and developing. All these rankings are determined by a country's level of advancement. However, this raises the issue of what defines a developed country. Geographers have been searching for a solution to identify a country's level of advancement and have created several models to explain it. W. Rostow developed the stages of economic growth in 1960 using Western concepts. It laid forth 5 stages that any country must go through in order to grow: traditional society, preconditions to take off, drive to maturity, and the age of high mass consumption. A country's stage of development is shown depending on where they lie on the model. Although it is the most widely referenced development theory and serves as a great example of the interaction between geography, economics, and politics, it is heavily criticized. People argue that Rostow's concept favors the Western model as the ultimate path to development, as the capitalist system is favored. Rostow does not consider the fact that all countries don't have an equal chance to develop and growth isn't always linear. Stage 1 is traditional society, which is characterized by a subsistent agricultural-based economy with low levels of trading. Burundi is an example of one of the countries that happen to be at this level. 80% of their people work in agriculture, making it a low-income country. Major hardships that Burundi faces deal with poverty, financial instability, and resources. 71.8% of their population live below the poverty line. Many people are experiencing hunger due to harsh weather conditions, including flooding and drought. When facing issues like poverty, it is crucial to be resilient by seeking out resources, building a support network, and setting goals, because if not, it could lead to worsening health conditions and raise a chance of developing new ones. Although resilience is required in Burundi to endure hardship, extreme resilience could drive people to become overly persistent with unattainable goals. The dark side of resilience states that goals that are not achievable cause individuals to waste time and energy. Burundians should begin by concentrating on improving their mental and physical health, and then set little goals, like finding someone to support them, which may lead to progress towards establishing a reliable foundation to live off of. Stage 2 is preconditions to take off, where more machinery enters the agriculture industry, which starts the transition to commercial farming. Ghana is an example of this. This country deals with issues like flooding, high debt, and poverty. Floods are not uncommon for them. Ghana has adaptation programs such as the Resilient Cities Network to help people because households are wrecked and help may not be reached right away. Regarding debt and poverty, strategies regarding better access to better basic public services and more job opportunities for the urban poor are sought out for poverty reduction, allowing people to bounce back slightly easier. Stage 3 is takeoff, which is intensive growth where industrialization begins to occur. Institutions start to become more focused on a new industry. Vietnam is currently industrializing, realizing the importance of innovation and new machinery. As a result of their fast economic growth, they are facing environmental issues like pollution and biodiversity loss. The government can play a critical role in building resilience by enforcing strict environmental regulations and standards. This can include things like waste management and pollution monitoring. Human rights are also a big issue, as rights such as freedom of expression and the right to freely practice beliefs in religion, etc. are restricted. Even though their rights are restricted, it is important to be resilient by persevering in the face of adversity. In The Long Walk to Freedom, Nelson Mandela says, It's impossible for one man to resist, but when together, determination can be reinforced, allowing people to grow off of one another, becoming stronger. This translates to Vietnam population because individuals need to create their own lives under the harsh government while building off the community around them. Stage 4 is drive to maturity. It takes place over a long period of time, standards of living rise, and the use of technology increases, and the national economy grows and diversifies. Brazil is considered to be at stage 4 and has a developing mixed economy. Growing poverty and inequality are the remaining effects of COVID that still affect the country today. One of the key ways in which Brazil has shown resilience in dealing with inequality is through the implementation of social programs and policies aimed at reducing poverty and promoting greater social inclusion. Programs like the International Fund for Agricultural Development assist around 257,000 families to overcome poverty in Brazil. Brazil also implemented policies aiming at improving access to better education and healthcare. Stage 5 is the age of high mass consumption, which is the final stage when a country's economy begins to thrive in mass production and consumerism. America is an example of a stage 5 country. Its economy is driven by high productivity, transport networks, and numerous natural assets. Problems that America most often faces include affordability of healthcare, drug addiction, and federal budget deficit. Individuals and the government need to be resilient with aims toward recovery so the issues don't progress. America has the highest cost of healthcare. In order to decrease the burden of illness, the government has implemented 6 primary programs like Medicare. In regards to the federal budget deficit, the government borrows money in order to sell bonds and bills in order to pay for the deficit. Both developing and developed countries face comparable obstacles, and the severity of those challenges differ. Developed countries frequently have more access to resources that might aid in resilience, making it simpler to overcome challenges. It is essential to highlight that resilience is not only influenced by resource availability. Other aspects, including personal characteristics, social support, and community cohesiveness, are also vital in establishing resilience, as demonstrated in the long walk to freedom. Even in the absence of important resources, poor countries are capable of overcoming trouble and being resilient, but with greater effort. Despite its influence, it might be damaging due to the fact that overused strengths become weaknesses. In conclusion, the adaptability of developed and developing countries in the face of hardship varies across countries.
Thanks. How did your research question evolve as you moved through the process?
My research question evolved through my research because I originally thought I wanted to address how resilience differs in crisis, although I decided to address resilience through hardship because difficult conditions like debt are experienced more often compared to intense times of difficulties like natural disasters.
Thank you. What additional questions emerged from your research?
An additional question that emerged from my research was what model is the most accurate for seeing a country's level of development, because Rostow's is considered to be outdated and doesn't account for all countries' level of development. This question is important because having a more accurate representation of economic development allows people to see what countries may need assistance because they might not have enough resources and could possibly become overly tolerant to adversity.
Okay, thank you.